Guys and ladies, today's video I'm going to talk about trap training, because some people want them, some people don't want them. However, trap development in most people's eyes is just one exercise. Now, I'm actually in our assessment room here today because I wanted to show you the anatomy chart, and I wanted to just show you kind of the fibers of the traps and the fact that the traps aren't just these bigger muscles in the top of the neck, but I also wanted to explain to you how traps can become pretty dysfunctional when they are overworked. So let me just show you. I'm going to get Gus to just pan across at the muscle system. Now we've got the male and the female one, but I'll use the male one just to start off with. The trap muscles come right up to this occipital bone here towards the skull, and the fibers run down, right down here, okay, right down to the clavicle, and the fibers run at this angled direction down here, the upper fibers of the traps, and then we have the middle fibers of the traps that run in this direction here, and then the lower fibers of the traps that run down here. So for those of you who didn't know, the trap muscles are actually a fan shape. Now, the trap muscles also attach onto the front here, right onto this kind of clavicle bone. Now the interesting thing with that, and hopefully Gus will get this, is this trap muscle here, when it attaches right onto the front, has a controlling impact in shoulder movement and this protraction. So what we find with a lot of people is they train their upper traps all the time, and they're always training this attachment that goes onto the front. So if you Gus pans over to me for a second, what we end up having with people that train the traps all the time and do all this shrugging is that they end up here. You end up very, very tight in this sternocleidomastoid muscle here. You end up very, very tight on the attachment part of the traps here. And you end up very, very tight up into the neck, which leads to this. Now, because they're pulling up and because this is pulling down, yes, you end up with this position here. However, when we actually look at the traps, quite a lot of people have very good developed traps, because exercises such as the deadlift, exercises such as shrugs, exercises like rack pulls, they all involve a stretching of the muscle fibers of the upper traps. The problem that we find with a lot of people is this isn't a very aesthetically pleasing position. So you get a lot of people shrugged up and people say, oh, they've got big traps. Well, they've actually got shit posture. All right, so what they've actually got is very, very weak mid traps, and they've got very, very weak lower traps. Now, I did a video recently on training the lower trap fibers, and this here, if you look back over the video, is exactly the muscles that I was talking about. And what I wanted to do in today's video is highlight that if you wanted to train these upper trap fibers, it's not a case of continually pulling yourself into this position here. It's actually pulling yourself into this position here so that you can train these kind of the full spectrum of the fibers of the muscle. And how do you do that? Now, just pan across to the female version as well. If you are a female and you are training, most females really should take a lot from the lower trap video that I made that's actually on the YouTube channel, because females don't really want the upper fibers of the traps. They really want to be training these lower and mid fibers of the traps, which you can find on the other video. However, panning back across, guys, if you want to develop these fibers of the traps, we're going to take you in the gym and we're going to show you some exercise variations that you possibly haven't thought about, because I know, guys, you want to build bigger traps. If you do, I'm going to take you through some different ideas. Okay, guys, interestingly, when it comes to trap training, it's the number one thing that causes most guys and girls, you know, if you do a lot of trap training, injuries around the cervical part of the spine. So what do I mean? Well, you have a lot of ligaments up and around the top part of the vertebrae, and you have a great opportunity to create a huge amount of impingement. And if you suffer any headaches or severe pain and discomfort into your head, you've got to question to yourself whether you're actually training your traps or just literally throwing weights up and down. So what do you see in the gym normally? Okay, it's fast, bouncy movement. Now granted, with a very heavy load, you're getting a lot of eccentric loading on the traps. The problem that you have with bouncing your legs up and down is that you're going to create a lot of shear forces in the vertebrae. Those shear forces over time can create minor sprains to the ligaments around the upper part of the vertebrae, cause a lot of problems, and a lot of people have a huge amount of impingement when it comes to things like pressing, chest pressing. You know, you've got to remember, guys, if you don't train your lower and mid fibers of your traps and all you have is this elevation, it's a number one reason why your upper fibers and mid fibers of your chest won't grow, because you have this inability to stay stable. So where am I going to go with this? Am I saying that you shouldn't lift big weights for traps? Not at all. What I am saying is, just like every other exercise, you have extremity execution. So you have the fully stretched position of the traps, and you have a fully shortened position. Now, I've trained my traps for years, and I have the ability to elevate pretty high without poking my neck forward. The minute you poke your neck forward, you're trying to literally move out the way to shrug up, which again will shear forces in your neck because you're trying to make the exercise easier. It's a muscle group, and the goal elevation, depression. There also, when you're training the traps, is an element of retraction, and we'll go over to one of the machines in a second and I'll show you how you can get that from changing your body angle. I'm getting the dumbbells. So when it comes to doing your traps, the things you need to consider is elevation. You shouldn't be talking like that, because that means you're compressing, right? And I'll do a funny voice, because that's what happens when you're up and you're blocking those vital vertebrae. That's where you cause problems. So with the dumbbells down by your side, you've got the stretch on the trap fibers in the length and range. You then contract them and you lift the dumbbells as high as you possibly can. You can keep them contracted, and then you lengthen them under control, and then you elevate, contract, depress. Now, I'm holding the 15 kg dumbbells there. Under constant tension and training the extremities under tension, as I've said, they will get heavy. The minute that you have to get the 20s, the 30s, the 50s, the 70s, and start bouncing with momentum, you've got no control of the muscle fiber. You're going to lead yourself to injury. You're not going to grow at the same rate. You think you will, but you'll 9 times out of 10 cause shoulder dysfunction. So just like any other muscle group, learn to train them in that as extremities, get strong. You don't need to suddenly be lifting 60s and 70s. It's not a massive muscle group. And when you consider chest pressing, you might only be able to do the 30s, yet you've got the 60s in your hands for the shrugs. Watch how the carryover is from exercise execution with both. And I'll tell you, the traps will be the one that's the shocking technique. So you're not actually lifting the load, you're throwing the load. Now, we've talked about it. So we've got the muscle fibers are going to come from stretch into the middle and contracting. But that's not it. You're looking at the fibers that elevate, and then we've got the fibers that come in this different direction. So what I'm going to do is take you away from the dumbbells now over to one of the rowing machines and show you how I create another level of variety to hit those right top end fibers, middle end, top end fibers of the upper traps. So guys, when you do a lot of your back training, depending on the angle that you sit at and the angle that you pull at, if you pull at that angle there, the angle of pull is going to head towards your upper traps. Now what does that mean? Well, it means that you can stay locked into a machine, because the minute that you pull up in this direction here, in normal back training, what we're looking for is that angle there, which means that we can recruit the lats fully. However, if you then change the angle of pull, it means the elbows are coming a lot higher, the elbow direction or the path that the grip of the handle is moving along means you're going to be training that upper trap fibers. And so long as you retract and contract as hard as you possibly can, you are going to be training the upper trap fibers. So it means you can lock into the machine, train the muscle fibers, you're more than likely to be able to lift a little bit more load as well. So what we do with this exercise here is we adapt it a little bit. Now, if, for example, I was to have the seat a lot higher, you'll see that I get very, very minimal elbow flexion, and by being in this position here, I hit a lot more lat. Now, then over time, you look at the machine and you go, can I adapt that slightly to be able to train more of the upper back? Well, yes. And you probably wouldn't have thought of this. So I set the seat a little bit lower. And now with the path of the handle, it's going to bend a little bit more at the forearm, but the path is going to come up a lot more here. So if I grab both handles and I push into the pad, and now Gus will be able to see this as I pull up towards the upper trap fibers. And one thing I'm doing here is I'm not leaning back, I'm pushing and driving into the pad. So I've got retraction, so that's that shrugging movement, and then I've got pulling right into the traps. So I'm locked in, driving forward, and pulling right up to the upper part of the fibers of the traps. Now combine that with any of the retraction from mid fibers and lower fibers of the traps, which again is on the other YouTube video, you've got a complete spectrum in which you can train the traps. So training the traps is not all about shrugging up, considering when you go back to the assessment room and you'll actually be able to have seen where the fibers are. So with anything, make sure you can initiate from that extended, the extremity range, contract all the way through. I have found one of the best things for traps is pausing in the contracted position. So 2-3 second pauses in that contracted position there, but just remember, when you're in this position here and you round and you pull, the more shortening you get from here and the more you scrunch your neck and the more you throw the weight around, the bigger the likelihood of picking up some level of injuries. So think smart, train hard, think about the different angles and ranges, and you have a more fuller and complete upper back.